Hey, what's up guys, it's Sync2. Today I wanted to quickly go over what the best leveling build is for Necromancer in Season 6 so you guys can blast through the leveling process super easily. Whether or not you're a returning player or you're more of a beginner, this is one of the easier builds to play, so you'll have absolutely no problems with that, and this is probably one of the single best leveling builds in the game. Has been for quite a while, and not too much has changed with it. We've gotten some new additions in the skill tree, and some legendary stuff has been shifted around, so I have updated the build. But it's just good old-fashioned Blood Surge plus minions, just gonna completely annihilate the game for you. It makes it super smooth, and you could end up using this in the end game as well. Minions isn't like a top tier contender in the end game anymore, but for leveling it is still extremely good, and early into the end game it is still going to fare very well for you. This build is pretty much just as powerful as it always has been, and I've been playing the expansion for about a week or so now, so I just decided to go out of my way to level up a lot of the characters, because not everybody wants to play Spiritborn, right? So figured may as well just quickly make some videos for the other characters for leveling builds, because I've played them so much, so I kind of know what to expect, and it's real easy for me to make for all of those, or for those of you guys that aren't going to be playing Spiritborn. Real quick, before I get into the build, I want to mention that I'm going to be streaming a ton over on Twitch, so I'd greatly appreciate if you could come drop me a follow. Come hang out, ask me some questions if you have any questions, or if you just want a place to watch Diablo while listening to some metal music or something like that. I'm going to be streaming a ton over on Twitch, and they're actually doing Twitch drops, so you can get yourself some free cosmetics by just connecting your Twitch Prime, etc. And there's also a pretty nice support a streamer program going on, where if you feel so inclined, you can gift 2 Twitch subs, and then you can get a mount, and if you get 4 subs, you get some armor for the mount. So it helps enable me to continue to create content for a living, so feel free to swing by if you're interested in that. And as always, the entirety of the build will be posted over on Mobalytics, so highly recommend checking out the build link in the description. Just slam it onto your other monitor. One of the good things about Mobalytics is you can enable the leveling path, so you can just see exactly the order in which we spend the skill points. When it comes to the actual build itself, I'll give a quick rundown for those of you guys that haven't played for a while, but the build is almost what it has been for like the last 5 seasons or something like that, where basically you pair Blood Surge, which is just a very high AoE, pretty decent damage right out the gate skill. You pair this with minions. Minions by themselves now, if you haven't played since launch, the minions do a ridiculous amount of damage. So, and there's a lot of ways that you can scale their damage, but while leveling, they are just inherently extremely powerful. So we pretty much just grab Skeletal Warriors, Skeletal Mages. The Golem is optional. I don't have it in the official build link, but the Golem is optional. And then you just spam your Blood Surge in addition to your minions, and everything pretty much just dies. So let's talk about the order in which you want to spend your skill points, and what are some things that are pretty good. Early on into the build, you will want to have a basic skill. Later on, you could actually end up swapping this entirely. Just take it off your bar and put on Golem. But for the purposes of making the build link pretty easy to follow, I'm going to keep Reap on. The reason that we use Reap for our basic skill and not other ones is that it has multiple synergies that are still really good that the other basic skills don't have access to. If you hit an enemy, you get 15% damage reduction. You get 30% attack speed after you kill an enemy, and the attack speed will go to your minions as well. And then every single time that you hit an enemy the first time, it was going to spawn a corpse. Spawning a corpse is good because if you're on a boss fight where, say, all your minions are dead or something, you could hit the enemy and then manually spawn a minion, so that is very helpful. And then we're going to go into Blood Surge. Blood Surge, just an AoE skill, just does pretty good damage. There's an aspect for it that makes it do slightly more damage. It's pretty potent. One of the great things about Blood Surge is that it's very good for survivability. It natively is going to heal you and give you Fortify, so you get extra damage, and you also get some damage reduction through that Fortify. Now that we're down in this portion of the tree, we want to just grab Skeletal Warrior Mastery. When it comes to the Book of the Dead, real quickly, when you just load into the game, you want to put Skirmishers on, and then 1 additional Skirmisher Warrior, and that's probably what you're going to use for quite a while. If you feel like the Warriors are dying quite a lot later on, once you gain access to Defenders, you could go with Defenders take 99% reducer damage, and then at some point, I quite like using the Reaper's Windup cooldown, reduces one of your active cooldowns, so you just have more uptime on some of your other cooldowns, but for most intents and purposes, having just 1 extra warrior is pretty good, and for leveling, they do pretty good damage. At this point, we are just going to put some points into stuff that just increases our damage, really. So Blood Surge is just going to increase our damage, and then we can grab Iron Maiden. Iron Maiden helps with our essence a lot. This passive makes it to where it doesn't cost any essence. It actually gives us 5 essence. So if there's 10 mobs down, you slam an Iron Maiden down, you get 50 essence. So that is particularly helpful. And then we can also grab Abhorrent, so that anytime we kill an enemy affected by it, we get some max HP heal back, which is really good. Now we're just going to finish leveling up Blood Surge real quick, and then around level 15 or so is where you want to put points into Skeletal Mage Mastery, because you'll unlock your Skeletal Mages. When it comes to Book of the Dead for these guys, early on you're only going to have access to Shadow, so you're going to just slam in the 3% increased damage for each active Shadow Mage, and you actually want them to do Shadow damage later on into the build, but Once you gain access to cold, this really helps because it increases, or you get essence every time they attack, and they're going to have really fast attack speed, and there's going to be a lot of mages, so that's going to help with your essence a lot, so you can spam blood surges out more. But once you're like into the end game and you swap over to the end game variant of the build, which I will have linked, you want to swap over to shadow damage because this just increases the damage, and them doing shadow damage is better than them doing cold damage, and you won't need the essence anymore at a certain point. So we'll just buff our mages real quick so they do extra damage, and then we'll go into Corpse Tendrils. Corpse Tendrils is nice because it just gives us a vulnerable application, and sucking in the mobs together is quite helpful for a lot of different reasons. So I pretty much always play with Corpse Tendrils. If you want to have a immunity, you could go with Blood Mist just for a little bit more tankiness over Corpse Tendrils. But personally, I quite like having the Corpse Tendrils, and I don't really need Blood Mist while leveling. But that is a little preference thing that you could do. Necromancer is very slow at leveling, so I'm just going to go into some movement speed real quick. I'll just grab the points. You could, like, a lot of these passes are kind of interchangeable with when you want to spend them, so you don't need to follow the build too rigidly. Once you get down here, there's some pretty good passes to increase your damage. So Inspiring Leader is good for crit chance for your minions, and then you can get Hellbent Commander, just increase the amount of damage that your minions do, which is quite nice. And then I quite like having the ultimate here. So this is the brand new ultimate. It's not like super good with the build, and you're probably not going to use it in like a later version of an endgame build, but it's a new spell. It's fancy. It does pretty good damage. It's fun to press, so I figured may as well just throw it into the build. You kind of have that extra skill slot that you can do whatever you want with. This Soul Rift could be Blood Mist, or it could be Golem, so that's kind of up to you. At level 25, you'll get access to the Golem. Feel free to put that on instead of Soul Rift, or you could put Golem on instead of Corpse Tendrils, or at a certain point you could just take Reap off entirely and rely on the Golem for a little bit more damage, in which case you would buff the Golem a little bit here with Golem Mastery. We have a ridiculous amount of skill points now. It's 71, and Necro doesn't have a lot of passives that are super insane, so we just have a ridiculous amount of points to spend. So at this point, we're pretty much just going to slam it into a whole bunch of passes to increase our damage. So Inspiring Leader for some more crit chance. For our key passive, we're going to go into Kalin's Edict, which is just attack speed and increased damage for each active minion, and this is very good. More Inspiring Leader for more crit chance, and then now we're just going to grab a whole bunch of passives. So we're going to go into Titan's Fall for increased damage while fortified. We'll go into Spiked Armor to get some armor at this point. It's like 15%, which is pretty good while leveling. You might just need a little bit of armor there if you don't have like Disobedience or something. And then we could grab, like, it doesn't matter what order, honestly. Amplified Damage is 12% damage. Death's Embrace is 6% damage and 12% DR. Grim Harvest plus Fueled by Death is just 9% damage. And then Hewed Flesh plus Imperfectly Balanced is 9% damage for your Blood Surge, which is pretty good. We can grab Finality to increase the damage that we do after we cast our ultimate, and then we can fully buff our ultimate so it has a lower cooldown and it does more damage, so that's pretty good. We can grab, while healthy, our blood skills do increase damage, so 18% is pretty nice. And at this point, you have 6 points to like kind of do whatever the hell you want with, to be honest. I tried this Lucky Hit Chance Barrier thing, and it's pretty weak, but if you wanted to have more uptime on Barrier, you could slam it there. Otherwise, I'm just going to go into Death's Defense just for our minions. Honestly, you don't really need this, but there isn't much else to put the points into. And then I'm going to put the remaining points into Corpse Tendrils just to reduce the cooldown of it. But if there's any other passive that you feel like swapping into, feel free to do that. You could always use Army of the Dead instead of Soul Rift if you want. Again, I just like Soul Rift because it's brand new. Might as well slam it into the build. Army of the Dead plus a certain aspect will do quite a lot of damage for you. But Soul Rift is cool, and it's not that big of a deal. It's a leveling build. You're going to annihilate stuff anyways. Right now, I don't have access to the brand new seasonal mechanic, but once I gain access to that, I will update the leveling build so that I know what to put in there. But right now, I don't actually have any idea what the seasonal powers are and stuff, so can't really speak on that. But when it comes to gear, pretty standard stuff, like what you want on your gear is just going to be generic damage. Damage to close, straight up % damage. Tempers is good while leveling, or if you get a summoning temper, which I didn't get yet, but a summoning temper for increase how much damage your minions do, or damage to cursed enemies. All of those tempers are pretty good. Otherwise, look out for generic damage like vulnerable, straight up damage, damage to close. That sort of stuff is going to be pretty good for you. When it comes to aspects that you want, Occult Dominion is pretty good. It's a utility aspect, so it can go on any of these 5 slots here, and just increases how many mages and warriors you end up getting, so that ends up just being a pretty good damage increase. Otherwise, Disobedience is good for armor. Hardened Bones is a straight up 30% damage reduction for you and your minions, which is quite nice. And then Blood Surge Echo is decent for increasing Blood Surge's damage. Basically, just makes it do 30% increased damage, which is okay. And then there's some pretty good minion legendaries. So this one is brand new. Your minions deal increased shadow damage to enemies. It's probably not worth using later on, but there are some synergies with enemies being afflicted by shadow damage, so that could end up being pretty strong. But if you happen to get it while leveling, just put it on. It does like pretty okay damage. 65 damage isn't too bad. And then one that's really good is reanimation. Your minions just deal increased damage while they're alive. Other ones that are good, you can just go into the codex here and literally just type minion. There's actually quite a few good ones here, which I haven't even gotten while leveling, unfortunately. But Frenzy Dead, really good, just increases the attack speed of your minions. And then this one, Great Feast is really good. It's 45% multi, but when you're using Blood Surge with it, you're basically not going to be able to cast Blood Surge, so you probably wouldn't put this on until you take Blood Surge out of the build entirely and you focus 100% on minions. But if you happen to get this, I would recommend trying it. It is a decent multiplier for your minions, but Frenzy Dead is also very good. And then if you want to use Army of the Dead, Unyielding Commander is quite strong. And then there's another one here. Where is it? I already have it. Your minions deal 55% increased shadow damage to enemies afflicted by any curse. At a certain point, you can swap to Shadow Mages, and then you could just slam this on. But if you happen to get this while leveling, it would probably be worth it to swap your mages off of Cold, and to just go into Shadow so that they gain that extra damage. While leveling, I would not recommend putting an aspect on your two-hander, really. Just go for the amulet. So either put reanimation here, or that cursed one, or anything that like has a pretty decent multiplier. I think reanimation is probably going to be your best bet, either reanimation or Frenzied Dead. Grasping Veins is pretty decent too, but it's not as good as it used to be. But if you happen to get this, it is definitely worth putting on. Just 50% crit damage multi. Leveling, you're not going to have very much crit chance, but you know, it is a decent mention. And then this one also, your Skeletal Priest now empower you at 60% effectiveness. This will buff you, and then it'll also buff your minions. I don't remember how much damage it was. I think it's 30% total. That's pretty much it for legendaries that you guys want to be looking out for. When it comes to runes, just grab any, like, you can't really deterministically go out of your way to get these, so just generic stuff that's good, like crit damage, crit chance, whatever. When it comes to the mercenaries, I didn't even level with them, to be honest. You can. There's not like a huge difference, so don't go out of your way to like try to min-max a certain one. It's not going to be a big deal for you, I don't think. Rahir is pretty good, just gives you armor and some extra damage, or damage reduction, depending on how you set it up. And Subo is pretty nice because it shows like minerals and herbs on the map, which is particularly helpful, but otherwise you're not going to get like a huge power increase from them, so I wouldn't worry too much about it. Just kind of just read through the trees and use whatever you want. Otherwise, that's pretty much it for the leveling build. It is very straightforward as always. If you want like some little gameplay tips, I'd recommend as you run into the mobs, press Reap. That'll spawn a corpse, and then if you don't have minions up, use that corpse to then spawn a minion. If you do have minions up, you can press your corpse tendrils, suck all the mobs in together, do a couple blood surges, then slam a Iron Maiden on them to get more essence so you can get more blood surges out. Pop your ult whenever you feel like it, and make sure that you're constantly using the summon minion button so that your minions are being healed by the priest that spawn, and you're also getting the increased buff from the, there's a damage buff every time that you summon the priest, so that will help you too. That's pretty much it though, pretty standard stuff. This build is disgustingly insane for leveling, always has been, and probably always will. Hopefully you guys found the video helpful, and I'll see you guys later. Peace.